Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Byer, and I'm with GAI Insights with our team, and welcome to our daily GenAI executive briefing, where we discuss and rate top news items. Our team of AI analysts rate each article as essential, important, or optional for executives and leaders at companies, and today's briefing is sponsored by GAI Insights. Ankaj, kick us off, please.
Sure, thanks, Paul. So the first news update that we have for today is from Microsoft. So Microsoft has launched a new small language model called Phi 2, and it is performing surprisingly well compared to other open source models, given the fact that it is not instruction tuned or RLHF done.
I'd argue for important on this one, not so much for the model itself, because it's pretty techy and very early in its research. But what it demonstrates, and we've been saying for a while, is don't get too bound to a particular model because things are changing very rapidly. And this is another example of that, where they just this is not a revolutionary new model or anything. They've just done a better job of curating data and doing a few things and improve things apparently by maybe an order of magnitude just by doing that. So commercial models, I believe, will follow shortly on the heels of these kind of things, and they'll be very useful and much cheaper.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like what we're going to have is large models where you can train your application and then step it down to a small, powerful production model that can run maybe locally. So this is certainly a trend.
I agree. I also want to stress, though, that it's really important that this is such a small model, because I think this is going to be an important step in getting AI at the edge, and in AI very fast, and in AI in very specific situations where you want low latency. So this is a great step that way. I also don't want to undersell the importance of data. I think the data is really, really key. And so the key to these Phi models has been the quality of the data that they've used to train it. Also want to stress that this is such a small model and was trained so quickly that let's say, there are lots of organizations that could train their own model on data like this if they really wanted to. And I also think that open source will follow. This model is not, I didn't get a chance to look at the license, but the other Phi models, the license has not been truly open source, but I think there will be open source alternatives to something like this with high quality data and small models.
What do you think the reason is that they have it for research only right now, just because it's early days and they want to see how it reacts? Or
I don't know. There have been a lot of models that are research only. I don't know if it's like a liability issue, or if they're, they don't want you to use it and then get in trouble for using it, then having them get in trouble for using it, or if it's is a business reason behind it, like they want to charge for commercial use or something. I don't know yet.
Yeah. That would be my guess. I think a combination of factors would be my guess. It's from a research organization. There's probably a process that takes a little bit of time to turn it into something they'll release. They also don't want to cannibalize the $10 billion they're putting into OpenAI, probably. And they probably want to charge for something. So they have all those things to deal with yet.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this whole AI on the edge, like you describe it, Julio.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what they can do now is so powerful and so dangerous, right? So imagine you can have something flying over your property that has the intelligence, right, to make decisions right there on the spot of things. Mm-hmm. Or the Polycom that we used to have in conference rooms, now that has some AI in the middle, and we leave the conference room, but that device now has all of this information and can make decisions on the spot. I don't know, it's like, as it gets smaller, it can be put in different things. I know this sounds like a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible type of movie, but I think we're getting there. And I don't know. I wonder sometimes if the delay in all of this is because we don't realize really the power and the risks, right, that we're opening by making these things smaller and smaller.
I want to be sensitive to time, so excuse me, Tanya. So important, Tanya, can you support that?
Important, yeah.
Okay, great. Let's go important. What's the next one, Akash?
The next one is from Claude and Google. So now Claude is directly available in Google Sheets. So you can just prompt Claude's chatbot in Google Sheets.
I have to say, this one, I don't know. I guess I call it optional, but in a way, I feel like it's important because to me, it just demonstrates Google's kind of like disorganized approach. Like, why? Why are we making Claude available in Google Sheets right now? I don't get it.
It's just an extension, isn't it? That's open to anybody.
Yes.
It's a plugin.
Oh, it's a plugin. Okay. I thought it was coming out from Google, and I was like, what? What are they doing?
I mean, OpenAI has this. This feels like an optional thing that any vendor can do.
Right. I call it optional. Really interesting if you're doing programming or you're doing sophisticated things with Google Sheets. So it could be interesting for people who are using it for reporting or applications in finance and things where you'd want a little better chatbot to help people sort through very complicated spreadsheets. Could be really nice, but it's a technical thing. You've got to use the API and program it. So limited audience.
Right.
I'd be curious to see how these evolve over time because I just can't see why, and except for Amazon, that's kind of got the more like distributive model, like why they would allow this to happen, or if there will be a way for them to start kind of shutting these things down.
Yeah, I think it's probably competitive. I mean, OpenAI's had extension for 6 months at least.
Yeah, and Google has a huge investment in Anthropic, so I would think they would want to support Anthropic's integration into their tools.
I would say I could be convinced down to optional, but I'm more for important just because, you know, in my world, I'm seeing more and more of these things where, like we said, it can analyze the data itself kind of thing. And so I feel like that's where now, like, I feel like we always thought the analyzing of the data is really a human task, depending on what you're looking at. But now if we can help, you know, get individuals up to speed, like executives and stuff, to use things like this, I mean, that could start eating into analysts. And so I'm kind of a little bit on the important camp, just because anything where it's quote unquote analyzing data on itself, I find very interesting. But again, I could be talked down because, you know, again, we made the point that it is a little bit technical, but this, I would argue, like, for example, I mentioned others like Julius AI that are literally building logistic regression. So you kind of have to know, hey, I need a logistic regression, minimize log loss. But this, it could literally be just very high level analyzing data that you don't necessarily need to know all that sort of back of house kind of information. So I'm an important camp.
Okay. It's a good point. I can buy it because the executive, the AI executive, may want to think about, be aware of things like this if they're developing data analytic projects.
Great. Sounds like important. What's the next one?
Okay, the next one is from In Silico Medicine. So they have announced AI drug discovery milestone in a pharma collaboration.
So I think you know my bias by now that I'm very interested in this stuff. So I will tend to temper my reaction. But this is really phenomenal from a science perspective. Again, this is like the sickle cell drug that was just announced recently, the first CRISPR gene editing drug for therapy that's approved by the FDA in the UK. This is, to me, a watershed moment where they've got designed drugs. Rational drug design's been a thing for a long time that's never gone anywhere. And this is an example. So it's very specific to biotech and pharmaceutical, but that's a pretty big market. And it's in production, and it looks like they're making real progress on designing drugs that would have been hard to formulate just from the normal research process.
I agree that but I would probably put this as important only because they didn't get super specific. Like they didn't announce, and we introduced XYZ.
Between important and optional because it's such a focused, again, an AI executive who's not in biotech and pharma, this is optional in my mind. Really interesting, but optional.
I would still say important because it is something. It's an example of what is more of these to come across various industries. That's why I say it's important.
Right.
It's true.
I think one of the things we've learned too is that these use cases that we see that apply to one industry, right, that we read about one industry, actually apply to other industries. So like the companies that do those air purifiers, the things about taking allergens out. Sometimes they have to do a lot of chemistry to do stuff, right? That helps clean the air in data centers, or clear the air in hospitals and things like that. There's a lot of chemistry that has to happen there. And so this platform that they're talking about that they've created could be leveraged in those other industries as well. So I think important, definitely important.
Tanya, one similar to that, to Tim's point as well, that this would be interesting to other industries. Drug discovery, super complicated, transforming that. What do you think AI can do to less complicated insurance industry?
Yep, it's a good point. And also just generally use cases in production that are showing early success is of interest to everybody.
Yeah, and a huge differentiator versus technology in the lab. So it sounds like important. Next, Ankaj, please.
Okay, the next one is from the political domain. So we have a political campaign called Ashley, which is based on a generative AI model.
Well, my first reaction to this was, oh no.
My first reaction was the EU AI Act that came out and said we cannot use this, for voting. We need that in the US.
Well,
I'm sure there's an exception for politics.
It's bound to happen at the end of the day. And, if we don't do something, as you said, Tanya, like regulation, the idea of a TV anchor has long ceased being journalism. Walter Cronkite was a journalist, Ed Murrow was a journalist, but the modern anchors are movie stars in a microcosm, and it's easy to replace that with the generative AI.
Well, this is not that story, Tim. This is the campaign call.
Oh, this is a campaign one. So this is similar, which is a robocaller that just sounds a little better.
Yeah,
the two stories I think feed off of each other. They're kind of related, right?
They are.
Right.
They are. I think I would say this is
even more. Oh no.
I would rank this as important in an election year, because of that being election year, but also because I don't know if this is the use case for disinformation that people had in their minds, right? Everybody's thinking about social media and sending information that way, whereas this one I think might be a little bit more surprising, to think that you'd be having like a back and forth conversation with an AI that has called you on the phone, on the behalf of a campaign, a political campaign. So I just feel like for awareness, this one feels important to me.
Well, and it also applies to other industries, right? Because what the article was saying is before they call you, they figured out that Tanya is a registered XYZ. She lives here. She has, these are her beliefs. This is, what school, she's involved, all of these things. And so when they talk to me, they know to talk to me about schools because I have two kids in schools about, you know what I mean? And so I think that technology, that intelligence can be applied to, before the account manager calls you, right? Is it your birthday? Did you buy something? There's again, different ways of applying it. What I thought was very nice of the creator of this is that he decided, or she decided, the company owner decided to keep it as a robot voice.
Yeah.
So that we know it's a robot talking to us.
And says that it's a robot right off the bat. So
go ahead, Amanda. Try to get in. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I have a little bit of a different philosophy here. For me, I find it optional simply because the use case is political. But I'll go as far to say, though, the things that we're discussing, the average hacker, schmisher, like whatever, who's hitting us up on emails also has the same technology. They know personal details about you, like your mother was just in the hospital. I hope she feels better. They already know all this. So I don't think the technology in that respect for the personalization is new or anything. And again, because it's politically focused, of course, to anybody, this is like crazy. But for our audience, I feel like because it's political, I say optional, but I can be swayed.
Amanda, is this a step towards you getting, instead of getting a junk mail call, getting a robocall that says, oh, I see your good friend Tanya recommended you needed $100,000 in insurance.
Yes, that's when Tanya was speaking. Is exactly what I was thinking of. Yes,
these are ads. Nothing but ads. They're just more well crafted in some sense ads, and look, those of us who were there when the first ads were put on the internet for search a long, long time ago, people were like, oh, that's terrible. I'll never like that. And now the entire industry feeds on that. And this is where we're headed.
Yeah. So it sounds like important. Everyone agree with that? Great. Next one.
Okay, next one is in the similar domain. So there's a new company launching next year which will only have AI generated news anchors.
Right. This is the one I'm sorry I was confused before, but this one to me was so obvious because, as I said, anchors a long time ago stopped being journalists and started being TV stars in a small pond, but TV stars nevertheless. And they're fairly easy to replace when they're not doing anything in the real acting sense, in a theatrical sense. They're just reading the news.
I think it's optional. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. It's not surprising, maybe, harmful to society, but that's not really of interest at one level to an AI executive.
I agree it's optional, but one thing that it made me start to consider, I mean, first off, I wasn't clear on whether these were real people replicated with, a system like Hey Gen, where you record yourself and then it can use your image to say whatever you want. But it made me think about, like, if that's the case, right, does the model for, say, acting, right, which is kind of related to this, acting anchor people, does the payment model for those people start to become something like it did for the music business, where you're now paid, these like little incremental sums for every time your likeness is, used somewhere? Opposite, if these people.
Well, I think it's an interesting idea, and I'm certain we'll get there. My read of this was these are invented avatars. They're not human voiceovers. But I can see there's an obvious case for, we already have the birthday cards and the robocalls from famous people. And now that you can use generative AI to have them say anything, you can have your own personal news feed from your favorite movie star or rock star or music star.
So
Or as an executive, your news, what's going on in the company by just reading all of the data that's circulating in the company's Slack and the company's email and the company's presentations. Yep. Like you can have someone say, hey, Miss CEO, these are the top things that your employees are talking about.
Yep.
Tanya, we call on our conference, Echo was our AI co-pilot and co-host, and she's been asking to get involved and start doing some of the readout of analysis of the thing. So we have our own avatar internal that is asking.
That was Paul. That was the first thing that came to mind. Where is Echo in our daily calls when I read this article?
It's also another sign of like just the flood of content that is coming our way, right? Because literally one person could create this product by themselves right now.
Right. That's why it's irresistible, because the cost is so low compared to the alternatives.
Yeah. And we already see this in the educational space. I've taken courses where they let you know that there's an AI generated avatar that's literally teaching the lecture and the lesson, and they asked for feedback on it. So I'm kind of torn on either way, because we're seeing this in other industries being implemented. So I don't know if I want to call it optional or important, just because of the technology, and this isn't the only place that it's actually being implemented and it's rolling out in different areas. So it could be important to just learn the tech since it is out there.
I agree.
It's funny. I've been judging importance for how many minutes our team spends on it, and this is already so,
it's important.
Let's go important. Is that the last one, Ankash? Ankash, you want to?
I thought there was one more, but maybe not.
There were some bonus ones, I think, that he.
Oh, there's Oracle embarks on a data center building spree.
Right. Right. I call this optional. This is, capacity is in demand. We've known that for a long time. Oracle's going to build more. All these companies are going to make a lot of money for a while.
Great. Thank you, everyone. That ends today's call, and continue to get the feedback. We've got a lot of good comments online from Michael Novak. Michael, good to see you online again and at Learning Lab on Monday. So thanks for contributing, and thanks everyone else for a good call today. Talk to you
Bye-bye.
tomorrow.